link to watch the webinar. Hey, amazing. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you are. And now we are going to switch from my face to AWS console and speak about 10 the best practices to have the most secure AWS deployment ever. So probably you can see in the chat box there is a link to a blog post on the BlueSoft global.com, and you can click this link and you will be moved to the blog post about 100 points to check to have the most secure AWS deployment. And it's really good to have this list on your desk, on your computer, to use it wherever you can to check that everything is perfect. So please take a second and go there, click this link, download it, and yeah. So let's start. So I'm switching to my AWS console right now. Yes. To be sure that everyone sees everything. Okay, lovely. So please remember that at the end of our webinar, we will be using chat box to find a winner for a coupon for $25 for AWS. So please stay to the end to win 5 times $25 for your AWS account, of course, for 5 different people. So I would like to tell about 10 very important things to check when you have your AWS deployment. So first thing first, if you are starting your AWS account and you have it, you have this, for your production environment, you must do one thing. So always when you are starting your AWS account, you are logged as a root. So it's really important to change that. So you have this amazing service from AWS called Identity and Access Management. And in this service, you can add different users and add them permissions to different AWS resources. So the most important thing you must do after starting your AWS account is to move to Identity and Access Management. You can create a group. For example, let's create that group, BlueSoft admins. So I'm starting with a few administrators who will be managing my AWS account. And now I'm giving this group policy. So for example, in this example, I'm giving a policy called administrator access. So this group will have access for all administrative, for all services. And what is really important, these admins, BlueSoft admins, won't be able to remove account or change some strange things with billings. So they can only manage the most important AWS services, but they don't have access to the most dangerous things in your AWS account. So these accounts won't be able to do. Give me a second. This operation, close the account, because only root can close the account. So it's really important to have these administrators and different users for different purposes. And what is also important to have, so for example, you have like 5 or 10 or 20 administrators for your AWS account, and then you really want to know who is doing what. So in a few seconds, I will show you how you can check, for example, what Seba, like a user called Seba, did in the AWS. But you need to have different users to make sure that you know what they are doing. So for example, if we have this account, we can start with a person called, let's say, Miro. It's my name. And I'm checking that this account should have only access to AWS Management Console. So it is really important to don't give this person possibility to have access key and secret key if this person doesn't need this type of access. So for example, if I will be using only this user for management console, I'm going to add only this access type for this user. Okay. And now I'm going to add this user to BlueSoft admins, review, and create the user. That's all. Now I can, of course, send the information to the user, but what is also quite important for AWS deployment to make sure that you are not using only passwords for management access to your AWS account, but also it's important to use something more advanced, and this is multi-factor authentication. It is possibility to use application on your mobile phone called Google Authenticator. For example, you can use any other devices that support AWS. And in this scenario, you will be able to use codes. Of course, you must first start with this code and provide your first QR code and generate second QR code. But after this process, you will be able to use not only your password during the login session, but also use the authentication code that you will receive in your Google Authenticator application. So I will show you that in 1 second. So you should see me in the screen, and I have this application Google Authenticator, and now I have different codes, and I'm not worried to show that to you because these codes change every few seconds, and then I will be using another code in my logging session after that. So as you see, now it's red, and in a few seconds it's green, it's blue. And I need to use this code to access my resources in AWS. Okay, let's move on. Is to move to your account settings and change something. So in a default scenario, and I see that in many production deployments, you have only few checkbox checked. So for sure, you must change something. So for example, you need to require at least one non-alphanumeric character. Password length 10. Some people prefer to use like 16 characters, but they don't require non-alphanumeric characters. But of course, it depends on your security policy in your company. What is also important to enable password expiration and prevent password reuse. So I also recommend to start with this checkbox 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then give access to people to your account, but with these requirements. Okay, let's move on and focus on other very important things. So as you see, security is always the most important thing, and I saw really bad things on production on my customers' accounts. So I'm always trying to recommend some things to change. But I'm moving now to my billing dashboard, and I want to tell you about one simple thing that you can do in just a few clicks. So in AWS, you have this idea of AWS budget, because when you are using AWS, you can connect your credit card, and when you are using resources like virtual machines or storage or databases, then you are charged for these resources. That's so simple. But you cannot prevent your AWS account from expanding beyond your budget. Okay, so because people from AWS don't know what they should remove or disable when, for example, you exceed $50. So there are other options what you can do, and the simplest one, and I really recommend to do that for every single one AWS account, is to create budget. So with budget, you are telling to AWS, hey, AWS, please, let's look for my cost, monthly cost. Start day, it's okay. And okay. Budget amount. So for this month, we have like $5,000. And we can use that, of course, for different AWS services, or we can use that for without any restrictions. But for this example, let's use EC2. I'm looking for Elastic Cloud Compute instances. So we have this budget of $5,000 for EC2 instances in my whole AWS account. And now notify me when actual cost, not forecast, but actual cost is greater than 50% of my budgeted amount. So in this moment, when people who are using AWS exceed $2,500, I will receive email. So Mirek, okay. And I need to, of course, add my SNS topic IRN. I don't have at this moment any, so it probably won't allow me to do that. Yeah, but, oh, okay, without SNS. Okay, it works, perfect. So in this scenario, I have this information that for virtual machines, I don't have any costs. So as you see, it's zero. And my current budget versus my current versus budgeted budget is on 0%. So there is no problem. But when I move to $2,500, I would be informed that that something is wrong with my account, and you should check that. Okay. So as you can see, in this configuration, I'm on 82% of my budget. Okay, it's very important and it's very easy to configure. Another thing, so I had this situation like 2 years ago with one of my customers. A guy asked me this strange question. So, hey Mirek, I have this problem. I cannot find any resources in my subscription. So it was really strange, but he told me that we had this incident with my team and someone removed all resources, but they don't know who did that. And I told him that you should check CloudTrails. It's a service that is used for, grabbing all events that are in your AWS account and showing them to administrators. So for example, as we can see, username root, of course it's a bad idea to use root, create virtual MFA device, root, add user to group, add user, remove user, etc. And what is really important, CloudTrails monitors everything. So you can have information who. So in this moment, root, and of course it's a bad idea to use root, but it's my test account, so it's possible. And who did what, and what resource type and resource name is connected with that. But what is really important, you need to implement that, power that on, because CloudTrails is not powered on by default, so you need to configure CloudTrail in your AWS account. It costs not too much, like few dollars monthly, but it's really important that you have information about all API activities in your AWS account, and you can track who did what. Okay, so another very important subject that you must remember about. Another thing, and like 2 weeks ago, I was helping one of my customers to deploy. It's a web-based solution. They're using 3 different environments: test, production, and development. And there is another story connected with that, and I will tell you about that later. But what is really important, when I saw that, so I moved to EC2 because they are using virtual machines, EC2. I saw that there are no information about names, and they have like 40 virtual machines, something like that. And it is really important to use tags. Tags are really easy to use. So for example, you can have this key name and you can use value like production 001, and now you have information what is all about. Because if you are using and if you are implementing your virtual machines from AWS Management Console, I'm doing this right now, you have, during the process of creating virtual machines, so let's use one virtual machine, possibility to add tags. Of course, if you are using CloudFormation, or if you are using scripts, or if you are using any other tools like Terraform, you can add these tags by default. But if you are using only Management Console, there is this possibility to skip this step. And this step is extremely important, because with 5 or 10 virtual machines, or 5 or 10 VPCs, or any other resources, you can easy have information what is all about. But if you have like 50, 100, 500 virtual machines or any other resources, it's really hard to check what is all about. So what I'm really trying to say here is to use this key value information for all your resources. And I'm recommending 4, and it's really easy then to check other it's really easy to move any other stuff based on these tags, like use billing or use scripts to do something based on tags. So what I'm recommending is to use name, and and you need to have some kind of standards in your organization. So you can use like prod app 001 or something like that. Next, you have termination date. And I'm trying to convince my customers to use that, because sometimes we can see like resources 2 years after deployment that we don't know what it's all about. So I'm recommending to use like termination date is 2017 11/11. Creation date, you can use that, of course. You can find this information in other places, but I'm really recommend to add that in tags. So for example, it's 2017 07/31. And another function. So keep it simple. So I'm recommending, I recommend to use like production. And now we know, that this solution is used for production purposes. And here is another step that it's really important. Always create as specific groups as possible. So it's for first deployment, for testing, it's okay to use this type of configuration, even to, if you are using like a web server, you can add this HTTP and you have SSH to access your computer from all addresses. But what I'm really recommend to on this step, first add name for the security group, so it's web server security group. Add great description for the security group, so it's security for web servers for production. And now we can add this access via SSH only from our IP address class, and add access via HTTP and HTTPS to our application from all addresses. It's really important to give really good names and really good description, because at this moment you remember everything. You remember every single thing today, but in 5 months, in 1 year, you won't remember this information. So it's really important to give great names. Okay. Okay, so let's check that. So here is my new virtual machine, EC2 prod app 001. And here you see this symbol, and you can click here and add other information. So your tag key. So we've just created function, creation date, termination date, and you can use that. And now you have so much more information about your applications, and it's really easy to find what you are looking for. And even when you spot this information that termination date is from the past, so you can of course remove this object from your AWS account. Okay, so let's move to another point. So this thing will be very easy to remember, but it's really important. So 2 weeks ago, I was doing consultation, and it's the same customer who is not using tags, and they had this production test and development environment, and for every single database system they were using MySQL. They had only one virtual machine for database. And during the configuration or RDS, so relational database service, you have possibility to use this checkbox, so multi-asset deployment. And they had on every single database for production, for test, for development, no. What it means, they had only one instance of database in one availability zones. And what we all know, everything fails all the time. So Werner Vogels, CTO of Amazon, says that every single time, everything fails all the time. And we saw many times that one availability zone wasn't available for people. So it's really important to switch this box to yes if we are talking about production-based deployments. In this scenario, we have 2 availability zones, and we have in these 2 availability zones 2 instances of your database, and that's all. We don't need to think about the whole process. The whole process of replication, availability is managed by Amazon Web Services. And of course, it costs 2 times more. Okay, that's a problem for some people. But you don't have this scenario that you are waking up one day and you don't see your resources in AWS because one availability zone is down. So it's really, really important for production deployments to use multi-asset deployment for your relational database. And it's really simple to deploy. Just only one simple switch from no to yes for multi-asset deployments. And of course, if you can see that in this window, now we have $107 and after switching, we have $214. Okay, let's move on. So there was this case of Verizon S3. I don't remember the name of this article, but I will try to find it out. Verizon S3 leak. Oh, yes. Verizon confirms data of 6 million customer was leaked. And they had they were using Amazon S3. And what is really important, they screwed up with security policy. And I will show you the most secure way to deploy your S3 resources on production. So just look what I'm clicking right now. So create bucket. So bucket is a container for your resources. It's only logical container for your resources. And let's use BlueSoft global S3. Let's put it in Ireland. It's really important to enable versioning. I saw many times that people lost some documents, and with versioning you have only another version of your document. So it's really important. But this is not what I'm trying to show you at this moment. Here, so as you can see, it's a clear, brand new, without any changes, security policy for our AWS. And you can guess what is the most secure way, what I can change to configure that in the most secure way. And I don't see the chat box, but I will show you. Next. By default, AWS gives access to my S3 resources only for owner of this AWS management connection. So at this moment, I have read, write permission to my objects in my bucket, but there is no public read access to this bucket, and it's really recommended. Even after this Verizon accident, AWS changed this description. And here also, yeah. And then, yeah. Of course, you can upload your file here, and additionally, you have possibility to configure that on your file. And here you can see also this configuration. Do not grant public read access to this object, recommended. So next, upload. And that's the most secure way to store your object in AWS, because no single user at this moment can access your files in AWS S3. So in this example, I want to use that in my browser, and as you can see, access denied. And at this stage, you should have like your test bucket, and for this test bucket, you should configure a proper permission policy. So this is of course for files, but I'm looking my bucket. Okay. And for bucket, you have two options. You have access control list. to add access for user, and you have more advanced configuration like bucket policy. And of course, you can generate during your development of your application these tokens that you can use to access your files, and this is really one of the best ideas to give access to your S3 objects, because these tokens are generated for a certain amount of time. But please remember that the default configuration is the most secure, and after that, only after that, that you have this your first configuration and you have this information that, okay, my application or my user cannot access my resources, then you can start configuration from your permission tab, and you can then add access control list and bucket policy for your configuration. You have this great policy generator and documentation for bucket policy, and it's really recommended to use for your S3 account. But please remember, the most secure deployment for S3 policy is the default one. Okay, so we have 4 more things to say in this session. So first thing, I would like to say, if you have EC2, there is no something like backup solution for your EC2 elastical compute instances. So you have possibility to use some kind of external tools like Veeam or any other vendors that can back up your database or your files on your virtual machines. Or you can, of course, use snapshots. And what I see that people, you can also check on my environment. I don't do snapshot, but I would like to do snapshot more often. But I forget about that. And of course, you can use scripts or you can use any external tools to do that. Snapshot is, of course, a snapshot of your disk. So let's imagine that you have your volume and you have your data from your virtual machine. You can simply create snapshot and snapshot. Okay. And now your snapshot is in pending state and it will be created in a few seconds. But what is really great, AWS in one website has this amazing EBS snapshot scheduler, and I recommend that to use for every single deployment because it's really easy and it's really cheap, because it uses Amazon CloudWatch for setting time when snapshots should be taken, AWS Lambda for scripts to take snapshots, Amazon DynamoDB to store data about your configuration for this solution. And of course, it connects to Amazon EC2 API, and it does snapshots for Amazon ABS volume, and of course it stores Amazon EBS volume snapshot on Amazon S3. And what is really important, but because for my surprise, not too many people know about this solution, and it's recommended by AWS, and it's really great, and it's really funky because it's used, Lambda and DynamoDB. You have this button, so please just search for that EBS snapshot scheduler, and you have this button deploy solution. You can use that. And now in documentation, you have this button loud solution. And as you can see, it's a CloudFormation create stack window, and that you can implement this solution. But what is really important by default, it uses the configuration in North Virginia region. So it's really important to copy your URL for this template. Of course, we can look at this template, but it's not important at this moment. And I'm working usually in Ireland region, so I'm going to switch to Ireland. And now I can use CloudFormation, create stack, and here specify an Amazon S3 template URL. You can paste it here. Next, and now you have some parameters to change. And here you have this parameter called default snapshot time. So by standard, the snapshot will be taken in 11:30 p.m. every single day. So it's really good to use that. And this CloudFormation template will generate for you every single resource that is required for this type of deployment, including AWS Lambda, DynamoDB, and security roles, etc., etc. So name, snapshot for EBS every single day. Yeah, create a role. And yes, I acknowledge that AWS confirmation might create IAM resources. Create. And I had one of this configuration here. So, as you can see, it's Lambda, DynamoDB, IAM role, etc., etc., and everything is configured and ready to do snapshot every single day. It's easy and it's cheap because snapshots don't cost too much money. They are stored on S3, so it's like $23 per terabyte, and it's really great. And also this CloudFormation script has one parameter for retention, so only like 15 days will be stored in S3. So really amazing solution, and it's available for everyone on AWS website. So let's move on. There is also one service that is not used often, but it's really great. And this service is called config. And AWS config track resource inventory and changes. What is really great, you can configure that for all resource types and or only for like virtual machines or database, or for like Redshift, your data warehouse, etc., etc. And you can store information about all changes in your AWS account. So let's look for EC2. And as we can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 EC2 instances. Let's look for a config timeline for one of them. And now, as you can see, I have a timeline with all changes for my EC2 instances. This is the one. I don't have any tag for this, as you can see, so it's really hard to find the name for this instance, but I can check that for any other. And as you can see, there are events. So I don't have any events at this moment because I deployed that only a few hours ago, but I have information about changes. So I can see information that configuration IAM instance profile was changed, tags were changed. As you can see, it's changed name value. It's at this moment, of course, here I see that name production. And what is really important, except that it's a really great feature and it's really easy to find information about changes. And there is this option about, just give me a second, about relationship. So it's really hard in AWS account without any external scripts or without any external tools to have information about all the connection between the resources. So for example, what VPC is used for these resources. So it's really great to have this one simple single window that you can check what other tools are connected with your AWS resource. In this example, with our AWS EC2 instance. So, for example, for this EC2 instance, I have this VPC, I have this volume, one subnet where this EC2 is connected, one security group, and one network instance. And of course, I can click and move to my VPC window in AWS config, and also I can change. I can look for changes in this window. And as you can see in VPC, I have much more resources, and it's also really great tool to have information what are resources that are used with this AWS VPC called VPC production. Okay, I'm looking on my checklist, and we have probably everything. Oh, maybe one thing, what is really important, and I'm trying to use Ubuntu. Okay, so this is really interesting subject because AWS have these instances called T2, T2 Nano, T2 Micro, T2 Small, T2 Medium, etc., and they are really cheap, and they have quite good parameters like 2 vCPUs and 4 gigabytes of RAM. But what is really important, T2 instances have this idea of CPU credits. So CPU credits. And I'm really recommend for every single of you to check that. CPU credits. Wait a second. Here is probably the better link. No. Okay. Let's use official AWS documentation. And you have this idea of CPU credits. And what is really important that for each of these instances, like T2 Nano, Micro, etc., you have this idea of CPU credits. And these CPU credits allow you to use 100% of CPU for a certain period of time. So as you can see, for every single hour where your CPU utilization is below certain point, like in this example 5%, you received new CPU credits. So you have like 30 credits, 31 credits, 32 credits, etc. And maximum you can have in this scenario 72 credits. And if you want to use like 100% of your CPU, 90%, 80%, etc., then your CPU credits are taken from you. So if you have 72, you have like 71, 70. And for a few hours, you can use 100% of CPU without any problem. And after a few hours, you can see in your CloudWatch metrics that you have like 1 CPU credit and 0 CPU credits. And after that, your CPU utilization is switching to base performance. So for the period of time after exceeding this amount of CPU credits that you have at this moment, your maximum CPU utilization for T2 Nano is 5%, for T2 Micro is 10%. And I'm telling you about that because I see sometimes that T2 instances are used for databases, they are used for critical applications, and for some period of time it's really good and without any problems that you are using, like 5, 10, 11, 15% of your CPU. But I saw some problems on production when, without any notice, database had problem with performance. And, the first thing I saw that it's a T2 instance, and I then moved to CloudWatch, and it's a monitoring system for AWS. And then you can monitor information about CPU credits and CPU credits earned, etc. And then you see information that, okay, at this moment you don't have 100%, you have only 10%. So it's really important to use T2 instances. They are really great, they're really cheap, but not for every single workload. So I'm recommending to use T2 instances for tests, for some kind of internet website that you can use auto-scaling to, add additional EC2 instances, but not for databases in production, not for critical line of business applications. Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. I'm trying to switch to our webinar jam broadcast session. So just give me a second to switch to my webcam. One second. So guys, thank you so much for being here and for listening to me. And I hope that this information will be really good for your AWS account and for your AWS career. So at this moment, I have 5 codes for AWS account. So you can use that for your test environment or production environment. It doesn't matter. So the only thing you must do, and I'm waiting for first 5 answers. So what I will write the question in the chat box. So, to give you possibility to answer in the same time. So my question is, what is so before that, so if you know the question, please answer in the chat box. And for first 5 people, I will send this $25 AWS code that you can use on your production on test environment. So what is the most secure way to secure your S3 bucket? If you know the answer, please type it in the chat box. I'm waiting for the delay. Oh, I see. It's a really good answer from Christopher. Next. Yes, it's the best answer. Next and next. Okay. So thank you. After ending our session, I see at this moment 5, 6, 7 answers. Okay, so I will send you information in the chat box. Thank you. with all the information that you can do to receive this code. So it will be so I will contact you in a few seconds after finishing this webinar. So Piotr, Christopher, Pavel, and Christopher again, Marcin. Okay, I will send the codes. So thank you for the answers. So thank you for being here. And I see that Marcin, I answered on YouTube. That's not a problem. So guys, thank you very much. And I have also one other thing to tell you about. So I'm switching also to my screen for a few seconds. So give me 1 minute, please. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, there is a website called Cloud Assistant. It's a project that we are doing with BlueSoft, and it's a solution to manage your AWS account. So if you are using AWS on production and you don't have the best knowledge to do that, and you want to have the second person that will be able to help you with the whole deployment and the whole process of managing AWS and other things, you can use this service called Cloud Assistant. For as cheap as $595 a month, you can have unlimited small jobs for one AWS account. Each week, we will do resource utilization report, map of AWS resources. We will present you AWS news and implication to your environment. And it's really good to have this as a backup for your skills, and use this service to make your team do more and to fear less. So what is really about is to give you the best resources, the best people that are your support for it's not too much money for this type of services. But also we have more advanced options. So for like $1,095 a month, we are adding proactive monitoring, and we are adding many more reports. And what is really important here, we are adding cost auditing and recommendations. So we saw that on different customers that were using our skills about cost optimization for resources like RDS, EC2, DynamoDB, Redshift, to save like $10,000, $20,000. That's not a problem. And for enterprise plan, we have also additional level of support. So we are adding dedicated support during failure, backup management, application performance monitoring, and architecture support. So you have access to AWS certified architect on the professional level for 2 hours each month. So, and if you want to start, just click any link on the website. So you should go to Cloud Assistant, and you have this link like order free 18-step AWS review. And during this review, we are going to check everything from security, configuration, backup policy, cost management, etc., to give you one beautiful, simple report. And it costs nothing. That service is done for $95. and now you can use that for free. Just simply go to AWS Cloud Assistant and click order free 18-step AWS review. So that's the team that is behind this whole project. So if you want to have the most secure, the most optimized AWS deployment, you want to save money, you don't want any AWS problems, and you want to have architects for your deployment, so please go to Cloud Assistant and order free 18-step AWS review. So that's all, guys.